If there is one series in gaming that I absolutely love, it's Mass Effect. Now, Mass Effect has been recently in the news with its upcoming remaster and the announcement of the next installment in the main story. Both are highly questionable choices EA and Bioware made, however, when it comes to Mass Effect, the current choices aren't as nearly as questionable as Mass Effect Andromeda was. Mass Effect is known for having a very detailed universe, yet still containing a lot of potential. Yet, EA and Bioware thought it was better to yeet everything that they built up over the span of 3 games out of the window and start over again in another galaxy. Now, I have played Mass Effect Andromeda on release back in 2017, and it's almost common knowledge that that game was really bad when it came to specific elements. My experience at launch, however, can be summed up very easily. In 3 days I finished the game, I was very disappointed and angry about what the game offered, and I left it there, hoping that I would never come back to it. Yet, here we are. So why am I here now, reviewing it? It's not hard to notice that I really dislike this game. In fact, I dislike it to such a degree that it made me skeptical about everything EA or Bioware related, even resulting in rather questionable content on this channel. Yet, here I am, playing and reviewing a game from years ago that I disliked and never wanted to play again. The reason why is very simple. You could argue that I just hate myself, as I forced myself to play a game that I dislike for 40 to 50 hours. While that is a valid point, the reason is a bit more complicated than that. The reason why is connected to another sci-fi series that I really like, which is Star Wars. I consider myself to be a fan of Mass Effect and Star Wars, and in my opinion, when you are a fan of something, you will support that no matter what. Now, it does not mean you have to turn a blind eye to the bad things. You should point out the bad things because you are a fan. However, as a fan, it's also your obligation to have the main focus on the good things. Now, here is where the Star Wars part comes in, as lately Star Wars also has been in really rough waters. However, the behavior of Star Wars fans is not something I would call fan behavior. It's more or less pure hate, and when there is something good, it gets swept under the rug. Now, if you are happy or not with the new direction something you are a fan of takes is completely up to you. However, because you don't like the direction it takes doesn't mean it's objectively bad. Yet, I have been guilty of doing the exact same thing with Mass Effect Andromeda. I let my opinion on this game be infected by hate and dislike of the direction it was going to take before I even played it, and when I was playing it I let my experience be guided by the exact same hate and dislike. And I consider that to be unfair. I dislike it when Star Wars fans do it, but I should practice what I preach, so it's time to set things right with Mass Effect. So without further ado, this is an objective review of Mass Effect Andromeda by a Mass Effect fan. In Mass Effect Andromeda, humanity, together with other races from the Milky Way, set out to travel to the Andromeda galaxy, seeking adventure, exploration, and new chances in life. However, everything that could possibly go wrong on arrival goes wrong. Some of the arcs used to travel to the Andromeda galaxy get lost, while others get heavily damaged. And soon after, it turns out that the planets that were designated as possible new homeworlds turned out to be inhabitable. With no home or hope, people turned to their Pathfinder. However, by an unfortunate accident he died and passed the title of Pathfinder on to you, the player. You play as Ryder, the son or daughter of the Pathfinder, and it's now your job to find a path that would lead to a new home for everyone in Andromeda. I really like the story premise. Exploring and colonizing a galaxy far from the Milky Way and facing the problems that come with such an immense task could offer a very interesting and good story. And the first few hours this story is being built up very well by the way the tone is set and switched around. You first get a narration that is hopeful and speaks of the collective ideals and dreams of the people that are going to Andromeda, which quickly gets taken over by the chaos that ensues the moment they arrive. People have to act fast and things go wrong and mistakes are made, and suddenly you are the Pathfinder, the key figure to this whole operation and one of the few hopes left for survival in Andromeda. It's fast, but the start is very nice. However, the moment you take center stage as the Pathfinder, the story sort of forgets what kind of story it tries to tell. Your character is the child of the human Pathfinder, yet didn't train to become one, so when the role is pushed onto you, it makes the story more or less an underdog story. Because of the lack of training and the situation that you obtain this position, people around you highly doubt if you can succeed. This is constantly hammered on by everyone. They all say you don't know what you're doing and that you are not Pathfinder material, which is true, yet the story constantly contradicts that underdog position. For a moment, imagine the insane amount of pressure that comes with a task like this and the degree of expectations you have to live up to. It's a difficult situation to be in and you would make mistakes in said situation. But every event in this story, no matter how difficult, is always resolved in the best, most perfect possible outcome you can think of. But that's the exact opposite of an underdog story. In such a story, the odds are always stacked against you and the path you walk is rough and hard, where even when things go well, mistakes are still made and the results are not always in favor of everyone or everything. But that is not the case in Mass Effect Andromeda's story. There are no stakes and the story really lacks the grittiness that makes a good underdog story. Not everything can or should go perfect, yet here it does. But to add insult to injury, there is a dialogue wheel where you make choices. However, the choices you make are solely cosmetic, which makes the story even more frustrating. Things are not going good in the story because I make the right calls. If your choices would affect the story, then you're bound to make mistakes because you can't always pick every perfect answer. It would make the story feel natural and good as your character grows by mistakes. But in Mass Effect Andromeda, that is not the function of the dialogue choices. They only affect the story's presentation and pacing, but in a bad way. All dialogue choices are cosmetic. They will only affect the current presentation of a conversation or event, but not affect the overall story or have consequences in the long run. Though, dialogue choices don't have to affect the outcome or have consequences by default. But when dialogue options don't make a difference in the story, then the story itself needs to contain the possible mistakes you would have made. Which doesn't happen here. Instead, these cosmetic dialogue choices make conversations very awkward at times or even completely disconnected. You got 4 types of dialogue choices: emotional, logical, casual, and professional. Every choice comes with a small description in the dialogue wheel, yet the description not always lines up with the lines that are spoken. And sometimes even the tone itself doesn't line up. There were moments that I picked a logical dialogue option which translated to a sarcastic, quirky, inappropriate comment in that situation, making my character look like an insensitive person even though the description and tone of the dialogue choice hinted at something completely different. And even in pre-made conversations where you can't make dialogue choices, replies to questions or things that are said by characters don't match up. An NPC just lost a friend or family member and your character replies to that situation with a sentence completely ignoring this. And then there is also the problem that the main and side stories have a lot of mixed messages. For example, at the start of the game, there is a person who is accused for murder, and after you investigate the case, it turns out that he did try to murder a person. However, he missed with his gun, but by coincidence, an enemy sniper killed him. Now, a well-thinking human being would think like, well, he didn't commit murder, but it's still attempted murder, which is also a crime. Yet here, everyone from the accused person to the leaders of the initiative dubbed this man to be innocent. Which is just absurd, but it gets worse as only a couple minutes later I get scolded at by the same exact leaders for not lining up to their system of order and justice. In the end, the story presentation suffers greatly by these cosmetic choices, and even without them, the presentation is very weak at times by the bad dialogue. Yet it gets even more frustrating because the rest of the story feels completely unsoothing for the story premise and build-up. The story that is told after the build-up is very simple and uninspiring, which is a huge waste considering the setting. Colonizing planets light years from home comes with a large list of big, impactful and difficult problems to solve, yet the story focuses on just another world-ending bad guy trying to destroy humanity, which only makes me ask the question, why? In a story like this, there's no need or even room for such a plot, yet somehow it's the only focus. Hereby, many interesting elements of the story are treated badly or even completely ignored. For example, we find new intelligent life in Andromeda, which is great! A new culture, politics and history to explore. I mean, first contact is really going to be a big challenge. How are we going to communicate with them? Are they friendly? Or do we, as usual, make a mistake and get on their bad side? Something like first contact is a very difficult challenge to overcome, but here in Mass Effect Andromeda, overcoming this challenge hardly takes 10 to 20 seconds, and I think that really summarizes how badly the focus of the story is. You travel light years to explore the unknown, only to ignore it the moment you arrive just to fight some evil generic dude. While there are some big problems with the story writing and presentation, it could have been a lot worse. On launch, face and other animations were absolutely nightmare fuel, which later down the line was patched. And I gotta say, for the most part the patch job was done really well. There are still some moments where you can see traces of the bad animations, and under certain lighting faces look still really bad, yet seeing what it used to be, I say they fixed it quite nicely. Though the animations are still very stiff and sometimes even a bit odd, yet on that end it's nothing out of the ordinary for BioWare. Their animation style has always been very clunky and odd, so on that end I let it slide. The game does look gorgeous, and I'm kind of surprised that this game is 4 years old. And voice acting here is also very good, or well, good for the most time. Alright, let's say it's at least very consistent throughout the game and does the job well. Unfortunately, the weird faces, animations, graphics or voice acting wasn't the main problem on release, or at least for me they weren't. And while the patch job on the face animations and lighting is good, it does not fix nor change the story, which is where the problem still lies. The combat, however, is very solid, fun and pretty decent. At its core, it's a third-person cover-based shooter, though it leans a lot towards fast action, or at least that's how I build my character. When it comes to combat builds, there aren't a lot of options. You got 3 classes you can invest skill points into, however the game favors a balanced spread build over a focused one. Each class does support a slight different playstyle, yet after 2 playthroughs I noticed that despite investing skill points differently, the gameplay didn't really change. There are a lot of skills that you can unlock and upgrade that can give you an edge in battle. However, from the like 20 to 30 skills you can only use 3 actively, which makes the combat feel very basic in the long run. This is mainly because you have access to all skills right from the start, so there is no real tactic when it comes to investing your points. Nor does it stimulate you to change up your build, as you don't unlock newer and stronger skills later down the line. I went with a very fast biotic build that heavily focused on fast recharges of the skills. I choose this build because the gunplay on its own is very bad. It's very stiff, slow and lacks a lot of impact. And oddly enough, using cover in this cover-based shooter kinda felt useless. Especially in endgame, as you can unlock skills that recharge your shield faster than the enemies can damage it. Though on normal difficulty, the enemies aren't complete sponges, which kept the combat a lot of fun, as you don't get into situations where you have to grind away at HP bar. But it would have been nice to be forced to use more cover. Enemies barely use any form of skills, and the few enemies that use some form of skills consistently are boring and are more of an inconvenience in your encounter than a threat. Yet my biotic build made the combat a lot of fun, even for long stretches of time. The game has a good balance between the story and gameplay. You spend just a little bit more than half of the game on the combat and the side quests. And the way the side quests are designed gives you a lot of control on when you want to continue the main story. While I like to have this kind of control in a game, here in Mass Effect Andromeda it felt a lot like an MMO. You land on a new planet for the main story quest, but at the same time there are a lot of side quests as well. You can choose to ignore them as they have no real effect or context and are just there for XP and loot. But ignoring them does take away the control you have over the pacing of the story. So you quickly accept them all before heading out, and once you do, it's just a matter of plotting out the best and fastest route to do all the side quests before doing the main story quest. And all side quests are straightforward. Go to a place, shoot some enemies or talk to someone, and there you go, quest completed. If you enjoy MMOs, this doesn't really sound that bad, and to me, it actually wasn't that bad. I enjoy an MMO from time to time and even find this kind of questing to be relaxing, though it's very uninspiring if you seek involvement in the world and even boring if you want interesting side stories or meet interesting characters. Especially on the characters' end, it was very disappointing. You explore Andromeda with a diverse crew and you are supposed to be their leader. During the missions and on your ship, you can interact with them to get to know them or even romance them. However, most characters are super basic or straight up boring. This is the element where most of the potential is wasted. Like there is a character named Cora, which is just painful to interact with because of the insane amount of potential that is wasted on her. She was officially the second in line to become Pathfinder and even had training for it. But instead of her becoming a Pathfinder, you did. She could be a great source of help and support for you. While she might not like it how you got your Pathfinder status, she still had the training and experience you lack. It could not only create an interesting dynamic between you and her, but an overall fun story as well. But that just doesn't happen here. She is salty one moment and the next she's your best friend, and it feels so forced and unfitting, which trashes a potentially good character. From all the crew members, only 2 were actually alright to fine characters. While the rest had their moments, they all just felt as disconnected as everything else when it comes to the story and interaction. Another huge disappointment and waste of potential is the way you explore Andromeda itself. First of all, you don't explore the Andromeda galaxy, but just a very small portion of it. Which is fine, even though the game was sold on exploring the Andromeda galaxy as a whole. Yet the exploration and interaction with the worlds you can explore is very surface level. As the Pathfinder, you have to find a new home for humanity, which you do by exploring potential planets. And while again the game looks stunning, it's also very empty and uninteresting to explore. You got a jungle planet, an ice planet, and not 1 but 2 sand planets. And while having such planets by itself is not bad, it's that they weren't memorable beyond the element that was most common on them. They have nothing really interesting or memorable to offer. And exploring other planets and stars in the Helios cluster was just as forgettable. Some of the star systems looked absolutely amazing, but there's nothing to explore there. You go to a planet, sit through an animation, scan it and get some information, and then go to the next. Sometimes you find a rich resource deposit or an abnormality, but you just discovered them for some resources or XP. It would have been great if they used the exploration of nearby star systems to strengthen and develop the human outposts. Though even if they would put that in the game, it would be the only interaction you will ever have with the outpost you set up. It would have been great if they used the exploration of nearby star systems to strengthen and develop the human outposts. Though, if that would have been in the game, it would have been the only interaction you will ever have with the outposts you set up. Which is the biggest disappointment of them all, in my opinion. The role as Pathfinder outside of the story does not matter. You work your ass off to make these planets habitable and to build an outpost on them, only to never interact with it again. There is no involvement with colonizing a planet nor help to build up anything in Andromeda. Which is not only the biggest disappointment, but also the straw that breaks the camel's back for this game. How can you skip the most interesting and important element of a game that is about humans trying to create a new home in a different galaxy? It still leaves me baffled they somehow completely forgot to make that part of the game. Everything in Mass Effect Andromeda just feels so disconnected. Like loose sand, this game just slips through your fingers. If it wasn't for the combat, this game would have even been worse and not worth any time. And while the combat is fine, it's still too weak to carry this game on its own. The patchwork they did with the lighting and face animations was just a band-aid to soften the disappointment of this game, as it ultimately did not fix the main issue. And all that is based purely on what the game itself does and show. I'm not going to start about how this game does not fit nor does justice to the Mass Effect series. Though I got to admit, after my second playthrough, I believe this game could have worked and fit in, but it's clear that there was a huge lack of focus and direction. Mass Effect Andromeda actually starts off good and interesting, but once you get past the first few hours it falls apart immediately. Though I would not call this a terrible game. In fact, I would recommend this game to people that want some mindless fun third-person shooter with a story they can skip. But for me, I had a hard time on launch to look at this game without constantly thinking that it was a huge mistake to leave a galaxy behind with enough things to explore just for a new beginning. I let that line of thought lead my experience and hate for this game. But now looking at the game without considering it being a Mass Effect game made me realize certain other problems. Though there were parts that I thought were better than I remembered, and stripping off the Mass Effect name made this game even bearable. However, to me, this game is painstakingly mediocre when looking at it objectively. And I honestly hope I will not have to play it for a third time. And that concludes my review of Mass Effect Andromeda. I hope it was useful to you. If you already played this game, see this review as a discussion starter. You might agree or disagree with me and I would love to hear your thoughts on the game down below. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, leave a like and consider subscribing. And with that all being said, I wish you a good day and until next time.